The inspiring story of a woman who proved them wrong, 3 jaw-dropping secrets revealed. Sarah's hands trembled as she served eggs and pancakes to the usual morning crowd in Elmwood. Each plate felt heavier than the last, burdened by the weight of dreams long cast aside. When the local high school students slipped in for breakfast, their laughter sparked a flicker of hope in her chest, a hope that the world offered something beyond serving tables and stacking bills. Yet, self-doubt coiled tightly around her heart, whispering that she'd never touched the stars. She was meant to remain in the shadows of the lives that glittered around her. She longed for science, for the energy that coursed through her veins when she immersed herself in formulas and hypotheses, but an invisible chain held her back. Who would listen to a waitress about renewable energy? As dusk fell, Sarah shivered against the chilly bite of her little apartment. While sorting through her late father's belongings, a weathered box caught her eye. Inside sat notebooks filled with his revolutionary research, his dreams of sustainable technology uncovered and united in ink. They beckoned her as if to say, "This is your legacy, too." A surge of warmth filled her chest, igniting a passion she thought had been snuffed out by years of uncertainty. But doubt quickly sneaked in, reminding her she was merely a waitress, with bills to pay and a predictable life ahead. Could she really change her story? Before she fully realized it, her mother's persistence convinced her to enroll in community college. With shaky hands, she signed her name, heart racing. Could she really honor her father's legacy? It was terrifyingly thrilling. She wrestled with new materials, trying to grasp the unfamiliar jargon swirling like a storm in her mind. But the unyielding skepticism bubbled up. Some professors mirrored memories of all the voices that had diminished her. A waitress would never fit in here. The gloom pressed upon her shoulders, making each lecture feel like another chain link in her confinement. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Another wave crashed when she faced a male classmate smirking and dripping with privilege. He took every opportunity to remind her of her place, laughing at the idea that she could compete. Why even bother? He sneered, taunting her with the fragile veneer of respectability that shielded her aching heart. You don't belong in this world. Rage boiled beneath her skin, a blend of unresolved hurt and burning aspiration fueling her hunger for validation. In her darkest moments, Sarah clung to a mentor, a professor who viewed her with understanding, lighting paths she feared to tread. With renewed fire, she traced her father's notes, each page a step away from despair. But as submission day loomed and anxiety swirled, the myriad of doubts invaded her mind once more. Had she done enough? Was this project merely a reflection of her heartbreak? With sweat trailing down her temple, she faced yet another chilling reminder, a threatening email that pulled at her resolve. In that moment, Sarah stood on the edge of everything she ever wanted. The urgency twisted in her gut, amplifying fears of being dismissed, of not being enough. Her journey had trapped her between honor and disdain, between liberation and suffocation, a reflection of a woman yearning to break free from underestimation as she clung to the dream of finally being seen. Would she dare hold her ground against a world that had already set a path for her to forget? The clock sat stubbornly at 2 a.m., ticking against the unforgiving stillness of Sarah's apartment. Her laptop hummed quietly, the screen illuminating her determined gaze as she combed through her father's research. Numbers and diagrams danced before her, fragments of brilliance almost outside her grasp. Yet, there was something in the complexity that drew her in, awakening the embers of her ambition. Instinctively, she clutched the edges of her father's notebook, its yellowed pages a tangible tether to her past. In her solitude, she could almost feel his presence urging her on. But doubt, the insidious whisper, slipped back in, reminding her of the taunts echoing in lecture halls and hallways. She was a waitress, after all. Would the world truly care about her theories? With a heavy heart, Sarah closed the notebook, surrendering to the despair flooding her thoughts. But beneath that despair simmered a new resolve. She wouldn't let that mocking voice define her, she couldn't. The very essence of her father's work was to challenge the status quo, and perhaps it was time to reclaim that courage for herself. The next morning, she arrived at class early, heart racing. Surrounded by her peers, she felt the familiar pangs of inadequacy, but today she focused instead on the pulse of resilience, the mantra repeating in her mind, "I belong here." When the professor entered, Sarah steeled herself to speak up about the injustices of energy affordability, her voice wavering but unwaveringly firm. To her surprise, she wasn't met with derision. Instead, her own passion ignited a discussion, pushing her classmates to consider new viewpoints on renewable technology. For the first time, Sarah felt the rush of acceptance wash over her. Ideas sprung forth as she contributed insight that resonated, and the previous sneers fell away like autumn leaves. However, the fleeting moment of triumph quickly unraveled as Sarah encountered her classmate, Jake, in the hallway after class. He stood there, quintessentially privileged, adorned in designer attire that screamed arrogance. How quaint, he chuckled, did the little waitress think she could shift perspectives? Look around, Sarah. It's a hierarchy. You'd be wise to stay in your lane. His laughter echoed, mocking her newfound voice. Tension clenched Sarah's stomach. 1,000 responses bubbled to the surface, but she refused to be baited into his shallow provocations. Instead, standing her ground felt immensely empowering. "You don't know me, Jake," she responded, feeling her voice gaining conviction. "I'm not just some waitress. I'm a student who is studying to change this world, and I will be heard." With that declaration, Sarah walked away, the sting of his words still present but overshadowed by her growing determination. Challenge after challenge tested her mettle, yet she began to understand that she wasn't just a waitress in a cafe, she was a force with a purpose. Days turned into weeks as Sarah pushed herself beyond her limits, attending study groups and immersing herself in every lecture. Each night, she'd pore over her father's notes, weaving her own ideas into the fabric of his work. Slowly, a project began to blossom, a sustainable energy model that combined his vision with her unique perspective. Submission day crept closer, and the anxiety pulsed through her veins. Would she find the strength to finalize her project and present it to the world? She sensed her heart in her throat, teetering on the precipice of rejection and validation. As she stared at her laptop, fingers poised to make the final edits, a sense of clarity enveloped her. This was it. With a deep breath, Sarah realized that proving herself wasn't just about gaining others' approval, it was about embracing her own worth. In that moment, she chose action over fear. Pressing send, she felt a wave of relief crash over her, mixed with anticipation. But as she hit the button, another email notification chimed, a letter from an industry leader, inviting her to interview to present her findings. Would she dare step into the arena? Risking everything against Jake's skepticism and the towering chorus of doubt, the time had come to face her ultimate test. The sound of her heart pounding was nearly drowned out by the sudden rush of anticipation coursing through Sarah as she read the email again. An invitation. The phrase industry leader sent a thrill through her while also tightening the knot of panic in her stomach. For weeks, she had dreamed of this moment, pouring every ounce of herself into her sustainable energy model, yet staring at that blinking cursor felt like standing on a precipice. Days blurred into frantic preparation. Routines altered as she combined her waitressing shifts with late-night readings, her eyes growing tired from the strain while her mind ignited with ideas. Each moment was a test, pushing Sarah to confront the depth of her resolve. Ironically, it was the sting of Jake's earlier taunts that fueled her. Every time she thought of his dismissive laugh, she shifted back into high gear, determined to dismantle the hierarchy he so proudly defended. Reflecting upon her project, Sarah felt sudden clarity. She was infusing her late father's work with her own insights about energy equity, a realization that transformed her research from mere academia to a living testimony of her commitment to change. Standing before a mirror, she practiced her introduction, her voice growing firmer with each iteration until it rang with confidence. On the day of the interview, the conference room loomed like a battleground, bright lights overhead and a panel of stern-faced experts seated at a long table, their eyes peering through layers of skepticism. Sarah's palms were sweaty against her presentation notes. She could already sense the eyes scanning her attire plain, because she had made choices that prioritized her dreams over appearances. She took a deep breath to steady her nerves. Stepping forward, she broke the silence. "Thank you for this opportunity," she started, her voice filling the space as she lifted her gaze to meet the panel's gaze. As she became immersed in her presentation, a quiet fire ignited within her. Her words transformed the data on the screen into a compelling argument that linked personal accessibility with sustainable practices. Moments of vulnerability began to strip away layers of fear. When she glanced up, she caught one panelist nodding in response. That small gesture catapulted her through the discussion, igniting a lively dialogue that explored the implications of her proposal. Their questions weren't dripping with condescension, they were probing, curious, as if she had unlocked a carefully guarded treasure. The weight of her father's legacy now rested proudly on her shoulders. Then something shifted, an arching brow caught her attention. It was Jake, seated at the edge of the panel, scrutinizing her every word. Her heart sank momentarily, but she reined in her emotions. This was her moment, and his judgments would not color her vision. The air crackled with intensity as the discussion reached a climax. When her time ended, she felt shot through with a mix of fulfillment and exhaustion, exhilarated by the engagement but wary of Jake's focused gaze. A moment later, the panelists exchanged hushed words before the head of the panel turned to her, a wan smile forming. "Your approach is impressive, but we're looking for something more innovative," he said, his tone a mixture of polite and dismissive. An ache blossomed in Sarah's chest, tempting her to succumb to doubt. But allowing his words to undermine her would be giving Jake and the others the power they sought. Instead, she took a breath, understanding that their vision of innovation didn't diminish her validity but challenged her to evolve further. "I appreciate the feedback," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "What if we unpacked the notion of innovation? Truly, at the heart of this work, I believe it begins with the community, ensuring that those most affected by energy inequities are included in the solutions." A murmur of interest broke through the panel. Perhaps she had touched on something groundbreaking, an opening that offered a chance to reshape their expectations. As she departed the conference room, a flicker of hope danced alongside the flickering flame of uncertainty. What was next after drawing them in? What would Jake have to say now? Would they embrace her vision, or would the shadows of hierarchy rise once more? With every pulse of possibility, Sarah wondered if she truly emerged as the contender she always envisioned, or if this was just the beginning of another climb against floating doubt. The clamor of voices dissipated as Sarah stepped outside the glass doors, the warmth of the sun feeling foreign against the chill that lingered in her chest. She could still hear the echo of the panel's skepticism, each word replaying like a taunt long after she had left the room. The sense of momentum she had felt during her presentation was dampened by the sudden weight of uncertainty. With her notebook tucked under her arm, she made her way to a nearby cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee beckoning her like an old friend. She settled into a quiet corner, the familiar hustle allowing her to breathe and think. The shadows of doubt lingered, but she pushed them aside, determined to reflect on the lackluster feedback not just as rejection but as a catalyst for growth. What did innovation mean to her, and how could she use her father's legacy to redefine it? As she sipped her coffee, she began jotting down ideas. Each word felt like an exploration, a way to dissect the feedback she had received. The community-centered approach she had suggested was merely the tip of the iceberg. If she truly wanted to grasp the notion of innovation, she needed to dive deeper. Suddenly, she had a flash of inspiration. Maybe she could reach out to local grassroots organizations working within underprivileged communities. Their experiences could provide essential insights that would not only enhance her project but transform it into something resonant and tangible. This was about more than her presentation, it was about creating solutions that could ignite real change. Inspired, she crafted a list of organizations to contact, forcing herself to see the potential in collaboration rather than focusing solely on her own path. Each name brought with it a renewed sense of possibility. Carried by this wave of motivation, she reached for her phone, the familiar impulse to let Jake's earlier mockery fuel her resolve. He had always seen innovation as a set standard, a narrow path paved with traditionally accepted wisdom. But now, she would gather insights from those who lived at the heart of the energy crisis. She would present an innovative blueprint that was dynamic rather than static, real rather than theoretical. Days passed, filled with emails and follow-ups. The voices of resource-laden panels faded into the background as she engaged in conversations that were not peppered with jargon or hidden agendas but with a raw, palpable urgency. During one call with a local leader named Maria, Sarah felt the spark of genuine understanding. Maria spoke passionately about how energy access was laced with complex issues of social justice, illustrating how many in her community had been left behind. Sarah listened, absorbing every word as Maria outlined their struggles not as obstacles but as narratives woven with resilience and determination. It was eye-opening, rekindling her purpose and clarifying her vision. When Sarah hung up, she felt a rush of excitement. A collaborative approach would be the hallmark of her project, a living testament, not just data points and graphs. It was time to nurture this work from theory into practice. As the pieces began to fit together, her father's insights, community experiences, her newfound clarity, she recognized that Jake's comments about needing something innovative held a more profound challenge. It was not just about how to impress a panel, but how to transcend limitations imposed by rigid expectations. This was her chance to redefine what innovation looked like, shaping it into something truly meaningful. Yet, as she embarked on this new path, the specter of Jake lingered. His presence in the academia they had both shared was formidable, and he wouldn't easily relinquish his hold on traditional metrics of success. Would he challenge her once more? Would he become a formidable opponent or a bitter rival in her newfound journey? Renewed determination coursed through her as she shoved her notes into her bag, ready to face both opportunity and adversity ahead. Just as she stepped back onto the bustling street, her phone buzzed, a message from Jake flashing on the screen, and she felt her heart quicken. What did he want now? Did he sense her newfound resolve, or was he readying a challenge that would provoke her to address his shadow directly? The moment had come to confront him, to prove not just her validity but the power of her revised vision. Would she be strong enough to let her growth speak for itself, or would she be tempted to engage in a defined rivalry steeped in their past? Sarah stood on the sidewalk, her heart racing as she opened the message from Jake. His words were sharp, filling her with a tangle of defiance and apprehension. Heard about your new direction. You know it's not sustainable, right? We need to maintain academic rigor. A part of her wanted to ignore his attempt at condescension, but deep down, she felt the need for a response, a way to assert herself amid his quiet insinuation of inadequacy. Inhale. Exhale. She reminded herself that his voice could not define her, let alone dictate her journey forward. After all, she had spent too long chasing validation from peers who saw change as a threat rather than an opportunity. It was time to reclaim her narrative, to transform that message into a powerful affirmation of her mission. As she weaved through the city streets, she felt a renewed determination surging through her veins. Each encounter with someone working on the ground was a reminder that innovation thrived in divergence. The real challenge lay not in conforming to expectations but in challenging them. She resolved to embrace authenticity, to build something that spoke to the voices that had been silenced for too long. She began crafting her response to Jake, her fingers moving swiftly over the screen, transforming doubts into assertions. Sustainability is not synonymous with rigidity, Jake. I'm exploring paths that we never considered, real-world applications that resonate with communities. Pressing send ignited a spark of liberation. With every word she wrote, she felt her confidence coalesce. She was no longer a passive participant in someone else's narrative, she was the architect of her own. Motivated, Sarah reached out to Maria once more, excited about the potential for collaboration. This wasn't just about gathering data, it was about integrating lived experiences into her project from the start. Maria had mentioned a local event that would bring together various stakeholders, and Sarah's mind raced with endless possibilities to connect and inspire. Back at home, she spread out her research across the dining table, notes from her calls, information about local organizations, and her father's old blueprints. A mosaic of ideas began to form. No longer isolated, Sarah was weaving in a tapestry of knowledge through first-hand accounts and weaving her father's principles into a vibrant new narrative. Days passed, filled with meetings and brainstorms. Light banter became a staple as she approached local stakeholders with humility and an eagerness to learn. They were pleased to see someone so passionate about addressing their energy concerns, yet she constantly reminded herself to keep their voices at the forefront. This was about amplifying their narratives and ensuring they were heard within the systematic channels that had historically overlooked them, yet the gnawing thought of Jake remained present. Despite her efforts to rise above his influence, she couldn't shake the feeling that he would soon confront her again, possibly attempting to engage her in a reflection on failures rather than successes. His challenges, she reasoned, would test not only the validity of her project but also her resolve. It would be paramount to emerge from that encounter armed with knowledge, unwavering strength, and an innovative vision rooted in real-life impacts. She spent sleepless nights revising her proposal. Each draft became an evolution of her thoughts, and she grew to understand the essence of the profound stories she had gathered. Innovation was not a checklist, it was a melody, a convergence of hardship and resilience, and she was committed to orchestrating that symphony. As she readied herself for the upcoming event, excitement and anxiety battled within her. Would she truly manage to convey her vision powerfully? Just as she was about to step out the door, another ping from her phone caught her attention. Another message from Jake. She paused, instinctively knowing this would demand her focus. Did he anticipate her moves? She glanced at the screen, her heart racing again. Let us meet. We need to talk about your project. I know something you should consider. What could he possibly have to say that she hadn't already encountered during her interviews? This challenge, she realized, was precisely the test she needed to solidify her growth. Ready to face whatever he had to throw her way, Sarah took a deep breath, knowing she now stood taller than before. The next step was pivotal. Would she allow his influence to seep into her innovation, or would she chart her own course, fortified by the stories she carried? Sarah felt the weight of Jake's message settle in her thoughts as she contemplated their impending meeting. Was it a tactic or genuine concern? The uncertainty gnawed at her, yet she understood that this moment could either solidify her newfound confidence or send her spiraling back to the shadows of self-doubt. She had weathered storms before, but this felt different. This was the defining moment in which she would either sink or swim. Determined to be proactive, she spent the day preparing for the meeting. The hours dragged on, punctuated by her meticulous organization of research notes and materials she had collected from her interviews. Each piece of evidence presented not just facts but feelings and the intricate human stories behind energy struggles. She practiced articulating her mission, biting back the fear that this wasn't enough to sway him. As the clock ticked closer to their meeting, a fresh wave of nerves washed over Sarah. She was not merely defending her project, she was standing up for the authenticity of her journey. What he considered impractical could also be the very approach that dismantled outdated paradigms. She gathered her thoughts, formulating a strategy in her mind. When they finally met at a local coffee shop, the hum of conversation and clinking of cups felt both invigorating and stifling. She spotted Jake at a corner table and steeled herself. Could his presence intimidate her? No. She was a force to be reckoned with. Thanks for meeting me, Sarah, Jake began, his posture relaxed, but she could sense the undercurrents of scrutiny in his words. Of course, she replied, keeping her tone measured. I'm excited to share my ideas. As he launched into his critique, his comments cut through her like cold air. It's commendable that you're passionate, but innovation without a solid analytical framework is dangerous. I worry that you might be fostering unrealistic expectations. The urge to defend herself bubbled inside her, but she breathed, centering herself. Instead of reacting, she took a moment to formulate her response. I appreciate your concern, Jake, but what I'm doing is integrating local feedback and lived experiences directly into my strategy. That, I believe, is just as rigorous as traditional methods. His brow furrowed, and Sarah could see the gears turning in his mind. He had not expected this. There was no denying the sincerity of her resolve, the depth of her research, and the empowerment she had felt in every interaction with the community. But how will you substantiate your findings? He pressed. Data without context is just raw numbers. You'll need to ensure there's a concrete linkage to academic rigor. Each question was sharper than the last, but instead of crumbling, Sarah leaned in, her resolve hardening. I've been immersing myself in these communities to understand genuine needs and solutions, she countered. That context provides a framework, one that is built on real data intertwined with people. Jake shifted in his seat, as if weighing the implications of her words. There was a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes, which unsettled Sarah but also fueled her drive. This meeting wasn't just a challenge, it was a battleground for her ideas, and she was ready for battle. What you're doing could work, Jake admitted, the words tasting unusual on his tongue. But you need a plan to present it to a wider audience. This street-level engagement is vital, but without clear parameters, it risks being disregarded. There it was, an opening. I'd welcome your expertise on refining my parameters. Your perspective on blending academic rigor and practical application would be invaluable. Volunteering for collaboration felt both audacious and necessary. The exchange shifted, no longer a confrontation but instead a dialogue filled with possibilities. As their discussion continued, the collaborative potential began to unfold. She could feel herself not just defending but growing, shifting into a more assertive, confident version of herself. The conversation closed, but as Sarah stepped outside into the crisp evening air, separation from Jake's worldview became palpable. She had fought to maintain her ground, but more importantly, she had expanded her vision. Yet within that victory, doubt lingered. Was she indeed ready to merge her thinking with his? Was collaboration with someone she previously viewed as an adversary a wise choice? Stepping away from the coffee shop, the weight of future uncertainties settled on her shoulders. There were still many decisions to be made, and clarity was elusive. The tension surged as she contemplated her next move. Would she continue to challenge the status quo or allow Jake's influence to overshadow her vision? One thing was certain as she walked away, the momentum was hers, but how she managed it would define her. The moment of truth was nearing. The days following her meeting with Jake were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Each morning, Sarah rose with the same determination that had driven her to confront him but wrestled with the shadow of self-doubt looming over her decisions. The excitement from their conversation dulled into a constant hum of anxiety, each buzz of her phone evoking a paralyzing mix of anticipation and dread. Would Jake respond with enthusiasm, or would he dismiss her ideas as naive? In her quiet moments, those nagging questions twisted into a mental maze where she lost herself. Was her project viable? Did merging with someone like Jake truly serve her vision, or would it dilute her message? She had prided herself on the authenticity of her approach, clinging to the stories and needs of the people she aimed to serve. Yet, now the idea of aligning with an analytical lens felt equally enticing and frightening. She decided to dive deeper into her research, not merely to solidify her arguments, but also to reaffirm her purpose. Spending hours revisiting her interview notes, she sought inspiration in the poignant narratives she had gathered. Each story became a reminder of why she started on this path. She imagined sharing these vibrant accounts with Jake, believing they could bridge the gap between human experience and the cold numbers he revered. Amidst this newfound focus, Sarah unearthed additional data that heightened her confidence. A small local study that explored renewable energy's impact on low-income families indicated notable improvements in quality of life. This could serve not only to humanize her pitch to Jake but also solidify her research's academic merit. She realized she had what she needed to create a compelling narrative, a story woven with both heart and intellect. With this clarity, she crafted a detailed plan outlining how to present her findings while integrating Jake's feedback. It was daunting to distill her passion into a structured format, but this task also felt liberating. Perhaps collaboration could bring about transformations that she alone couldn't achieve. Days later, Sarah found herself penning an email to Jake, inviting him to review her refined proposal. The decision felt monumental. Writing the draft required a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. With each keystroke, she revealed a piece of herself she feared might be misjudged or dismissed. She clicked send, her heart racing as she did. The potential for disappointment hung over her like a tempest, but she sensed that this was a pivot point. The next morning, she was startled to find a response from Jake already waiting in her inbox. As she read through his feedback, a roller coaster of emotions surged within her. His commendation of her dedication and the suggestions he made for enriching her data interpretation sparked a flicker of hope. It was, however, tempered by his insistence on a more rigorous analytical framework. Was he still questioning the viability of her work, or was this constructive criticism meant to help her succeed? Confronting her fear of inadequacy, Sarah began drafting a detailed outline to include more robust data analysis alongside her qualitative findings. Each edition felt like she was reconciling her instincts with rigor, a necessary dance between passion and professionalism. However, doubt lingered. Why did she have to prove herself at all? Hadn't her experiences spoken loudly enough? This internal conflict simmered, reminding her of the journey still ahead. As she prepared to resubmit the proposal, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the first act in a larger narrative, one that might evolve in ways she could hardly imagine. Could she balance the true essence of her project with the expectations of the academic framework that Jake advocated? The crossroads loomed ahead, and every step forward felt precarious yet essential. In the quiet of her workspace, surrounded by her notes and the steady rhythm of her thoughts, Sarah resolved to embrace the challenge. This was only the beginning of her story, and she was ready to confront whatever hurdles lay ahead. But as she faced her emerging resolve, another uncertainty crept in. What would happen when their ideas clashed? Would she remain true to her vision, or risk losing it in the partnership? The real test of her commitment was set to unfold, and it felt like the moment of truth was inching closer than ever. With the morning sun filtering through her window, Sarah felt the weight of her recent endeavors pressing upon her. In the haze of new data and Jake's analysis, a palpable resolve began to grow. This was her chance not only to fortify her project's credibility but to assert her identity as a researcher capable of consolidating both emotional resonance and analytical depth. She spent hours painstakingly revising her proposal, the clattering of her keyboard punctuating the silence of her determination. Each sentence she crafted was infused with the depth of the stories she had collected, her passion interwoven with the hard facts Jake had insisted upon. She was not merely adhering to an academic structure, she was reclaiming her narrative, sharpening the focus of her vision while adapting to the challenges of collaboration. Yet, as the words flowed, the specter of doubt flickered in the back of her mind. Each time she highlighted a statistic, part of her feared it would drown the emotional narrative she had gathered, rendering them insignificant. She wrestled with the dichotomy of her efforts. Could numbers ever truly encapsulate the lived experiences of those she endeavored to uplift? But perhaps, she mused, the merging of these two worlds could breathe new life into her endeavor. Surely, Jake's analytical prowess didn't negate her authenticity, it could enhance it. Amid the tumult of her thoughts, a breakthrough emerged. She recalled a pivotal interview where a single mother, struggling to maintain a sustainable home, shared how access to renewable energy changed her life. Sarah had captured the raw emotion of the woman's story, the hope embedded within her struggle, and that was the crux of her project. This was the moment to lean into her passion and let it guide the analysis. If the data could tell a story, then her presentation could underscore that very humanity. With renewed vigor, she meticulously crafted a section of her proposal that paired qualitative anecdotes with quantitative statistics. It felt revolutionary, as though she were bridges gapping disparate worlds and creating a unified narrative that honored both perspectives. However, she grappled with the fear that Jake might not embrace this duality. Would he see it as an offense against his analytical principles rather than a harmonious blend of their visions? As she assembled her final draft, another shadow crept in, the fear of presenting. What if she faltered under Jake's scrutiny? What if her confidence couldn't withstand the pressure of his intellect? But within the whirlwind of apprehension, a flickering flame of ambition ignited. She would enter this next phase ready to defend her perspective, not out of obstinacy but from a deep knowledge of her purpose. Revising her email to Jake, she hesitated but finally pressed send, heart pounding in rhythm with each word of her final proposal. She recognized this was not simply about being accepted, it was about asserting the integrity of her work. Days passed, each moment stretched thin by anticipation. Then, a reminder alert disrupted her focus, drawing her attention like a gravitational pull. Jake's name filled her screen again, igniting a torrent of emotions: excitement, anticipation, and an undercurrent of fear. As she opened his feedback, words flew toward her eyes like arrows. His praise struck a vital chord, yet his suggestions for improvement sent chills down her spine. He appreciated her integration of personal narratives, but urged for a clearer delineation of the data analysis she embedded, proposing a more rigorous statistical framework to support her claims. Sarah felt her heart rate accelerate. The once encouraging feedback now felt suffocating in its expectations. But what if this was more than just a critique? What if it turned out to be an opportunity for her to challenge herself further, to transform her discomfort into a catalyst for growth? As she mulled over his words, the revelation bubbled up within her. It was not just about Kai or the numbers, it was about her ability to rise above the doubt. That threatened her vision. The moment was at hand to engage deeply with Jake's perspective while standing firmly in her own. The real test loomed with the anticipation of their upcoming meeting. Would she have the courage to confront the rigidity of Jake's analytics, framing her emotions within that context? This confrontation of ideas might just be the proving ground for her professional awakening. As she prepared mentally for the discussion ahead, a single question consumed her: would she emerge from it empowered, or would she lose a part of herself in the process? The clock ticked insistently, a steady rhythm underlining Sarah's racing thoughts as she approached the meeting room. She could feel a lump forming in her throat, a physical manifestation of anxiety as she recalled the words of encouragement from her mentor offset by Jake's precise critiques. It would be their first real face-to-face interaction since the email draft, and every ounce of her body urged her to prepare, to practice, to assert herself. In her mind, however, blends of fear and determination clashed. She entered the room, catching sight of Jake already seated at the table, engrossed in a stack of papers. He looked up, his expression shifting from absorbed concentration to expectant curiosity. Sarah hesitated at the threshold, momentarily engulfed by the weight of the space around them. Then, summoning her resolve, she slid into the chair opposite him. "Hey, thanks for meeting with me on such short notice," she managed, her voice betraying a tremor she tried to hide. "Of course, Sarah. I appreciate your efforts in integrating those narratives." "It's a significant step," he replied, his tone unyielding but not unkind. As they delved into the feedback, she could sense his analytical mind sifting through every aspect she had presented. "It's commendable, but I would argue there's a fine line between emotional engagement and academic rigor," Jake stated, an edge of caution in his voice. "Data must lead. If we lose sight of that, the project may lack credibility when scrutinized." His observations, stripped of emotional interpretation, pierced through her defenses and sparked a simmering frustration. She felt as though the very essence of what she aimed to achieve was being challenged at its core. Was her work, her emotion, overshadowed by cold statistics? A quiver traced its way through her fingers, and she steadied herself against the table. "Jake, I respect your views on data integrity, but the point of this research is to highlight the real stories behind the statistics. If we disconnect from the people involved, the numbers become lifeless," she argued, her voice gaining strength. "That single mother, for instance, her story isn't just data, it's a testament of resilience that we should center in our analysis." Jake looked at her, the slightest flicker of surprise crossing his face. It was ephemeral, but she felt emboldened by the moment. "I agree that narratives are essential," he conceded, "but we must ensure that they are supported by robust data. It's not about negating their impact, it's about giving them credibility." His words echoed her own doubts, yet they also ignited a fire within her. Perhaps this was the partnership she needed, a balance she had to negotiate. Here was her opportunity not just to defend her stance but to evolve it, to mold it through collaboration rather than conflict. She realized that she didn't have to choose between emotion and analysis, both could coexist if she engineered the conversation effectively. I see your point, Jake. What if we blend narrative depth with rigorous data? Could we create a format that doesn't sacrifice one for the other? She asked, her voice persistent yet open to negotiation. As they continued exchanging ideas, she began mapping out methods to synthesize the qualitative and quantitative aspects with his guidance and her insights. The discussion fueled her senses, shifting from discomfort to a thrilling exchange of innovation. She was no longer just a passive contributor, she was a co-architect of a vision. By the time they concluded, Sarah had absorbed enough feedback to refine her proposal further. The anticipation of a follow-up draft felt exhilarating rather than daunting. As she stood to leave, Jake said, "You handled that well, Sarah. I appreciate how you articulated your perspective. Let us see where this dialogue takes us." A deep sense of achievement washed over her, but it was accompanied by the thrilling sensation of possibility. She resolved to embrace this momentum, to not shy away from the challenges ahead but rather to amplify her voice amidst the analytics. Stepping back into her world outside the conference room, she felt a new clarity wrap around her mind. What had initially felt like rigid opposition had transformed into a collaborative dance of ideas. However, this clarity tugged at her consciousness as the next challenge loomed. Would she maintain the balance between emotion and analytics, or would external pressures push her toward conformity? The following day would bring her next chance to present further findings, a pivotal moment she could either seize or forfeit. Would she integrate her vision with the demands of analysis, or would she slip into a role that suffocated her authenticity? After weeks of meticulous refinement and undeniable growth, the day of Sarah's second presentation arrived. Dressed in professional attire that felt foreign but empowering, she stood before a panel of experts once more, her heart steady with newfound confidence. The air crackled with anticipation as she prepared to dive deeper into her subject, both awaiting scrutiny and embracing the opportunity to articulate her unique perspective. She opened her presentation with a powerful anecdote about the single mother whose struggles with energy accessibility had inspired her research. The room fell silent, captivated by the rawness of her words. Drawing from her earlier feedback, she complemented every emotional narrative with facts and figures, ensuring each statistic was anchored in real-life impact. The dual approach resonated, creating a synergy that sapped tension and fostered connection. As she spoke, Sarah witnessed nods of approval around the table, marking a remarkable transformation from her last encounter with the panel. This time, her insights were received not as a threat to academic rigor but as a necessary integration of human experience within the analytical framework. One panelist leaned forward, eyes gleaming with interest. "This approach of merging qualitative with quantitative is groundbreaking," he remarked, his voice filled with newfound respect. In that moment, the culmination of her journey crystallized. The doubts that once haunted her began to dissolve in the light of acknowledgement. She had not just proven her abilities but redefined the contours of innovation by fearlessly weaving together what was often seen as opposing strands. Once she concluded, the panelists engaged in a spirited discussion, probing how they could further embrace community insights in their future projects. It was a stark contrast to the lingering skepticism she had faced earlier. The validation confirmed what Sarah had come to understand: true innovation thrives at the intersection of emotion and intellect, and by embracing the human side of academia, she had carved a pathway toward authentic change. Stepping out of the building, the sunlight washed over her, and she felt buoyed by an exhilarating sense of fulfillment. Her heart surged with joy, knowing she had harnessed her father's legacy, her responsibility to challenge societal norms and advocate for the underrepresented. The days that followed were transformative. Her proposal garnered interest from local organizations, leading to collaborations that promised to bring the project to fruition. Sarah had successfully stepped into a community of professionals recognizing her potential, no longer merely seen as a waitress but as a respected contributor to the discourse on renewable energy. She received an invitation to present her findings at a local university conference, putting her on a new trajectory that filled her with purpose. With each passing day, she felt a sense of solid confidence unfurling within her. Instead of hiding behind past definitions, Sarah celebrated her entire journey, realizing the experiences that had once seemed burdensome were the very stepping stones to her professional evolution, and when Jake, acknowledging her success, expressed interest in collaborating further, she welcomed the opportunity with a sense of pride. "Let us elevate this project together," she said genuinely, feeling empowered no longer by the shadows of comparison but by the strength of collaboration and shared vision. Sarah had conquered the limitations others imposed upon her, transforming doubt into assertiveness, vulnerability into confidence, and fear into action that propelled her toward genuine acknowledgement. With her voice established and respected, she embraced the exciting possibilities ahead, fueled by an unwavering commitment to paving the path for renewable energy innovation that put people first. This was her moment. She had achieved what felt impossible, redefining her narrative and career on her own terms. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.